It is my deep pleasure and honor to introduce the Richard Gibb keynote speaker this evening, my dear friend and our dear colleague for more than 40 years, Dr. Cyril H. Wecht.
Good evening. First, I want to thank Professor Sam Hazel and his son who scored the music for this eloquent presentation. Sam is an old and dear friend, poet laureate of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, distinguished professor, poet who has organized international poetry forums here in Pittsburgh for many years, and we are grateful to him and to his very talented son for this warm, moving, and disquieting presentation. I want to add my welcome to that expressed by my dear friend John Regal. First, I want to thank John, who has, with the graciousness, consent of Dean Caffardi, in his role as Associate Dean, been permitted to spend so much time in developing our Institute of Forensic Science and Law. Without Dean Nick Caffardi's approval and active and positive feelings toward this, John Rego would not have been able to make the contribution that he has. And of course, through Nick and John, I cannot tell you how much we owe to the faculty of the Duquesne University School of Law, who have been so generous in contributing their time in the lectures in our Saturday certificate programs and in other special presentations, and to other members of the Duquesne University faculty and administration who have also made contributions, and I'm not going to get into naming all of them. I want to thank the staff, Maria Comas and Eileen Edwards and my son Ben, who have done such a great job, and to all the women and others who are donating their time downstairs with the registration and so on. And to everyone else who has contributed in helping us to bring together the largest assemblage of individuals that have been convened in 4 decades in any kind of a program dealing with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Without input from all of these people, the sponsoring groups, it would not have been possible to accomplish this. We have here this evening, I think, registration somewhere around 800 or more, about 1,300 or more tomorrow, about 900 on Saturday, about 800 on Sunday, and this is without knowing who is going to come to the door and register. We just had a registration from Sacramento, California at 8:30 last night, so who knows what is going to happen. I want to welcome all of you, many of you longtime friends, members of the legal and medical and scientific communities, distinguished members of our judiciary, fellow elected officials here in Allegheny County, the members of law enforcement and nursing and other professional communities in our organization who have contributed so much and who have been part of our various programs. And of course, I am indebted to the members of our advisory board of the Institute of Forensic Science and Law. If you look through your programs, this is about as distinguished a group as you could possibly put together. And these people have served on a gratuitous basis and giving freely of their time and effort, coming to these annual meetings and programs and helping us make this institute one of the most sterling organizations of its kind anywhere in the United States, indeed, I believe, anywhere in the world. We are grateful to them and to all of our local and visiting faculty. And also today, of course, I want to extend a welcome to everybody who has come, whether you are a a student at Duquesne University, whether you are a member of the community, the people, especially from 40 states, we're so grateful and honored by your presence. And of course, to the distinguished assemblage of faculty. There has never been, I believe, a convocation of such a group dealing with this subject, and you will see this unfold through the evening and through the next 3 days. Top-level academicians, learned professors, distinguished authors of textbooks and many other books and numerous articles, people distinguished in the medical professions in various specialties and in law and in other related academic and professional fields. To all of them, we extend a warm and grateful welcome. But I think the most warming feeling that I have is to those young people who are here tonight who were not alive, obviously, and who have been busy, understandably and properly, with any number of things that have occurred in this country. Serious students who have excelled in different fields and who have found it appropriate, desirable to fit this program into their schedules and to their faculty from high schools and colleges, universities, and even middle schools who are here today and will be in and out during the next 3 days as their schedules permit. To see young people who have this kind of an interest is indeed very gratifying, and it means a lot substantively as we begin to dwell upon this subject. And it is, and I hadn't even thought of it until this very moment, the best possible segue into the discussion. Why are we here assembled? What is this all about? 4 decades, isn't this enough? Don't we know everything that we can know? I have been asked repeatedly by good, intelligent, appreciative, friendly, sympathetic members of the news media, what is its purpose? What does it mean? The fact that young people today in America continue to want to hear about the JFK assassination. In some high schools and colleges and universities, there are courses devoted to this. And the requests come in for speaking engagements, I'm sure, to every one of the critic researchers in this room, repeatedly, from all levels of society, to come and address this subject. Therein lies the answer. Yes, maybe we'll take a little bit of credit collectively because we have continued to talk and write about this, but could we have forced a subject? Could we have accomplished something if there weren't a deeper feeling to draw upon? I'm asked, what is the remaining controversy? What is it all about? How did things come to happen in this way? Why can't we know more? Well, let's take a journey back through history and let's think about things as they occurred. And let me say at this point, and I may repeat it, while this is, as the title says, solving the great American murder mystery, obviously a program devoted primarily, and I say that without any hesitation or embarrassment, directed toward primarily a critique of the Warren Commission, the very subject that got me drawn into this 38 and a half years ago. We are going to have opinions expressed by very erudite, sagacious, intelligent people on the other side. And we reached out for more of them, I want you to know that, who are believers in the Warren Commission, and for one reason or another, this one couldn't make it and that one declined and so on. It isn't that we felt we had to have a balanced program, an even-handed approach, 50-50 right down the line, but we did reach out for others. And this is going to be a program that is going to be conducted with dignity, with decorum, and people are going to have a right to express their views, and we want to hear from everybody, and we shall. Because I believe that even those people who believe that the Warren Commission got it right somehow, as intelligent people, as forensic scientists, as attorneys, as criminal investigators, whatever you will, or just as interested American citizens, you've got to acknowledge, and these people, the honest ones with a sense of morality and ethics and personal decency, have acknowledged all of these faults and deficiencies. Well, if that be true, then why can't we look into this matter? Why should we walk away from it? As one of my colleagues, Attorney Roger Feynman, pointed out in the Q&A session that was conducted with the news media a little bit ago, murder cases have been reopened. Indeed, one of my dearest, closest friends on the other side, Michael Barton, Michael dug up and did a great job with the Medgar Evers case and was responsible for justice in that case after many decades. And as Roger pointed out, the Birmingham, Alabama case going back preceding the death of President Kennedy. And there are other cases, including cases of old presidents being dug up. So the idea that, gee, is this some kind of a ghoulish endeavor? Is this some kind of a, as Gerald Posner, forgive me, I know there's not supposed to be any profanity this weekend, said the other day on the program, it's come to be a cottage industry. Well, said I to Mr. Posner, a cottage industry. In the meantime, in these 40 years, I managed to produce 4 great kids, 10 great grandchildren, and I've accomplished a few things in my life, Mr. Posner, and I haven't even had the time to write a book, for which I apologize. I'm not proud of that. I should have written a book, but I haven't gotten around to it. The idea is a cottage industry. These people from whom you will be hearing, they are distinguished people in all their own right. Here in academia, here in medicine, and so on. They have been doing other things. They've not been profiting from this, although there's nothing wrong with writing a book and earning profits, whatever the subject may be. But what I hope is that even people on the other side, maybe after listening to this for 3 days plus, will come to understand and reflect back, much of which, most of which, perhaps all of which they know, and come to realize, hey, if it is this simple, if it is this straightforward, what's the problem? Wherein lies the basis for any hesitation? Let's get to it. And let's see all of those sequestered records, those obfuscated reports, those missing documents, the x-rays and the photographs that were recorded but somehow are not around. Let's go back to November 22nd, 1963. Let's see who's responsible for the morass that exists. Let's see who is at fault for the problems that remain with us. Is it the critic researchers? Those of us who are gathered here tonight? Were we responsible for the selection of 2 pathologists, Humes and Boswell, who had never done a single gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers, to do the post-mortem examination on our president? I am repulsed by that, just as a citizen of America, and admittedly perhaps more so as a forensic pathologist. My former chief, Russell Fisher, Milton Halpern in New York, Geoffrey Mann in Virginia, Joe Spellman in Philadelphia, Alan Moritz in Cleveland, Dick Ford in Boston. These are the people that were the giants in their field. They lectured at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. When I was in the Air Force, my chief sent me there knowing of my interest and plans to go into forensic pathology. They were used by the government back through and following World War II. Every one of them was excluded because they shared the same deficiency, the flaw that was in common amongst their ranks. They were civilians. To call in 2 people who had never done a gunshot wound autopsy to do this autopsy. Yes, they brought in Pierre Fink as an afterthought, an Army man in the naval setting arriving in our lake, and Pierre, the one person that I did know personally, a very decent guy. Pierre was largely limited to military-type stuff over in Vietnam, reviewing the cases. He had very little hands-on experience, and they did not do autopsies at the AFIP. And when Pierre had the audacity to open up his mouth, and he asked, and I can close my eyes, I wasn't there, but I never picked up this punctilious Swiss gentleman, and he said in that crisp tone of his, "Who is in charge here?" And a gruff voice from the audience came forward and said, "I am. Just proceed, doctor." 4-star admirals and generals in the room that night, 36-40 people. That was a scientific endeavor. It was a controlled military operation. That's what it was. And who was responsible for that? What about the car and the blood? Would there have been some tissue? Could criminalists like Henry Lee, oh, Henry was just running around in short pants, but whoever was around at that time 40 years ago, could they have learned something from examining the car? You here in Pittsburgh, judges, attorneys, police, we have a murder, the least important controversial murder you can think of. Pick the least important citizen in our entire county. You think the Allegheny County or Pittsburgh homicide detectives or the coroner's office forensic scientists or any of my people are going to allow somebody to go in and begin to wash the car? Immediately begin to scrub the blood and the tissue? No kind of investigation is conducted? A defect in the windshield? We got to take that car to Detroit and get a whole new windshield quickly. Governor Connolly's clothing? Oh my God! We got to get it to the dry cleaners and the shirt has to be cleaned. That's going to happen in your community? Those of you who come from 40 other states or 9 other countries or any other part of this state? No way. Who did that? Who was responsible for that? And then let us proceed. Who made the decision to take the body of the president out of Dallas? There was a board-certified forensic pathologist, a medical examiner, Earl Rose, right there. And I am certain that if Earl Rose had done the autopsy, and I don't say this to tout Earl, any one of us experienced today, we were just kids then, but I mean our predecessors, as a board-certified forensic pathologist, functioning properly, quietly, privately, in a medical examiner coroner's office, would have done this autopsy, and we would not be here convened this evening to spirit that body in violation of the laws of Dallas and the state of Texas and take it to Washington, D.C. They even thought for a while maybe there would not be an autopsy. And then they made the decision, well, we'll do it at Bethesda. Who made that decision? And then let's move on after that. The investigation that took place. The Warren Commission. How about Jack Ruby coming into the Dallas Public Safety Building? Warren Commission told us, he just walked down the back ramp. That's right. And all the Texas Rangers and FBI and Secret Service and Dallas uniformed and non-uniformed cops, they just stood there as Jack walked in. Any one of you in Dallas that day, vacationing or living or visiting, you too could have been part of history, because you too could have just walked down the back ramp and you would have been there when Oswald walked through with the 2 huge non-uniform detectives on either side of him. We came to learn later on, of course, that that was not the case. That is not how Jack Ruby got in. Other people could learn this, but indeed not the Warren Commission. And who then was responsible for what followed and flowed thereafter? Let's talk about the Memorandum of Transfer. Admiral George Berkeley, April 26, 65, I believe was the date, in which he itemized all the things that he submitted to the National Archives. And included in there clearly is the container with the brain, the microscopic glass autopsy tissue slides, photos of the internal chest wounds, microscopic slides of the entrance wounds or exit wounds on the skin, whatever they might have been. April 26, 1965. Who was responsible then for the absence of these items 1.5 years later? Oh, in that 1.5 years, guess what happened? They made a decision, and darn it, I must confess with much embarrassment to all of you, and I hope that it will not be a legally offensible crime for which I shall be incarcerated, that we have failed to follow suit. We have failed abysmally, ignorantly, and unsympathetically to do with what they established as policy. We have failed in the Allegheny County Coroner's Office in all of our homicides to put together the bloody clothing, the knife, the gun, the bludgeon, whatever it was, wrap them all up, put them together in a package with a blue ribbon, call in the widow and say, Mrs. Jones, we'd like you to have this. This belongs to you. This is your personal property, a bit of memorabilia for your husband's murder. That was the decision. Did the critics and the researchers do that? Or did the United States government do that? All of these things belong to Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy so that she could make this constructive transfer. Jackie didn't want it, Jackie didn't need it, and Jackie never saw it, and Jackie never took it home. It was there. But 1.5 years later, it wasn't there. On October 31st, 1966, when they now went over to do the inventory on this constructive transfer, those things are not there. Did the government know about this? Yes. Did the critic researchers know about it? No. In August of 1972, I went in, finally got in. Oh, and who was responsible for not responding to my inquiry, my request to go in? Under the provisions of that gift, the reason that the gift was made, the reason that the decision was come up with in some absurd fashion, that Mrs. Kennedy was the proprietress of all that that material, was that she could have a proviso, and the proviso was that nobody could see those things for 75 years, with the exception that, quote, recognized expert in the field of pathology with a serious historical purpose, unquote, could apply. And I applied to Burke Marshall, former Deputy Attorney General, and I applied and I applied. He was now a professor at Yale Law School. And I kept writing and I got no answer. And one day I got a call from Fred Graham, then a senior reporter of the New York Times. He had heard about this, I don't know how. And I told him, and he called me back some weeks or months later. Had I heard back? And I said no, because he had spoken with Burke Marshall, and he said, ask me if I minded, if he would call again. And I said, oh, please do. And finally, I got this response from Burke Marshall. He was going on vacation, he was coming back, and so on. And then he said, well, you got to come to New Haven. Little did he know that that's my second home, and I had relatives, close relatives there. I was delighted to go to New Haven, but he thought that that was going to turn me off too. So I went to New Haven. He had to interview me. Did he interview Dr. James Latimer, the urologist, whom he had given permission to before? Maybe he wanted his prostate checked out at the same time, I don't know. But that for sure was not the basis for having me come up for the interview. So who was responsible for that? So finally, then I got in there. And that is when I, quote, discovered, unquote, the missing brain. Oh, I didn't discover a new continent. Who knows how many people knew about it? Did the community, the world, know about it? Were the critics, the researchers, were we responsible? Oh, you'll hear people, perhaps maybe even at this conference, oh, we know that the brain was subsequently buried with the president. We know that Bobby did it. You know, you show me. You show me the government document. You show me the graveyard record that indicates that that brain was buried with John Kennedy subsequently. I have never seen such a record. And who was responsible for that? And then there was the Clay Shaw trial in New Orleans. And Jim Garrison, sure, Jim was a bit flamboyant. Was he neurotic? Perhaps, was he a grandstander? Because anything you want to. I've said worse about a lot of prosecutors. I mean, that goes with the turf. Did he have a right to look into the case of Clay Shaw? And you'll hear about this over the next 3 days. Who was responsible for every move he made, every request he submitted? He was thwarted. He was stymied. He was blocked. He was ridiculed. He was embarrassed. He was treated in the most denigrating, hostile fashion. Who did that? Do you know how prosecutors get along with each other? When I'm going to testify in a murder case for the defense in some state 1,500 miles away, that prosecutor gets in touch with the district attorney in Allegheny County. He wants to find out about me. Oh, they're a very close fraternity. But when Jim Garrison, the district attorney of a huge city, in a case of this importance, made simple requests, what do you know about Lee Harvey Oswald? What do you know about David Ferry? What do you know about this one, and so on? No response, or we can't give you anything, or so on. Who was responsible for that? If there was nothing to hide, and Oswald's now dead and gone, what's the problem? What's the difficulty? Put it out there. Lay it out. And when I testified before federal judge Charles Halleck Jr. in January of '69, because I had been consulted by Garrison, and I told him, I got to see the materials. I can't come and testify unless I see the autopsy. I testified, and Judge Halleck, a very distinguished, bright judge, the son of the GOP floor leader, Charles Halleck Jr., Sr. from Indiana, ruled that very day from the bench that the government had to let me get in there. The government attorney stood up and blatantly, boldly, almost insultingly to the judge said that they would appeal until hell froze over to keep me out. What was the problem? It was so clear-cut. Then what is the problem? So finally then, as I've told you, I got in 1972. Who is playing the games here? And then we see, of course, the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And we'll hear all about that. Who was responsible when the forensic pathology panel had the opportunity to meet and interview and query Commander Humes, the chief pathologist, for seeing to it that one of the members of the panel, yours truly, was excluded? I learned about it afterwards. Professor Blakey, who had taken over after they forced Dick Sprague out. And who was responsible for seeing to it that Dick Sprague was maneuvered out? One of the best trial attorneys in this country, one of the most experienced district attorneys, assistant DA, who really made that office. You'll recall him from the coal Yablonsky cases, the coal miners' deaths, the murders, the brutal murders of Yablonsky and his wife and daughter here, and Dick handled all of those cases. And Dick came in and said, "Sure, I'll deal with this." And he said, "I want these homicide investigators, detectives, and so on and so forth," just the way he would pursue a case in Philadelphia. And they said, "What, are you crazy? You want homicide detectives? What, are you serious about this, man? Come on, this is just, it's just a little government operation." And they start leaking stuff, and Dick was out, and they bring in then Blakey in a nice, controlled environment. Who was responsible for that? How did that all unfold? And then who was responsible for the flip-flopping of Humes and Boswell in subsequent years? And I might add, of course, for the self-imposed exile of Pierre Fink. Pierre Fink, as I told you before, the consummate European Swiss gentleman. He epitomizes what you would think of, what you've seen portrayed in movies. Pierre Fink, except I think for that visit, has not stepped foot on American soil. Or if he has, I sure haven't heard about it. Certainly nothing in conjunction or correlated with this JFK assassination. Does that tell you something? It may not be scientific, but you can draw your own inferences. Pierre doesn't want to talk about it. I will tell you this, and I'm not breaching any confidence. When I gave my paper at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences in February of 1965, after having been asked by the program chairman to do so at the plenary session, which was going to be a critique of the Warren Commission report that had come out late September, early October. Oh, and by the way, let me interrupt myself on that. I went to the Carnegie Library, a wonderful library, 26 volumes, right? No index. No index. Who was responsible for that? Our beloved friend Sylvia Marr, M-E-A-G-H-E-R, for those of you who are not real buffs. Sylvia Marr, who wrote one of the great books, Accessories After the Fact, along with Josiah Thompson's 6 Seconds in Dallas, and Mark Lane's very, very early book, Rush to Judgment. Sylvia, a single woman living in a small apartment in Greenwich, working at the United Nations. This woman, and this is pre-computer, my friends, this woman prepared the index. She could do it, but the U.S. government could not. Okay? And so now I prepared, and I went there, and I gave that talk, which is how I got started in all of this business. Who was responsible for producing those 20? Didn't even bother, didn't think it was necessary to have an index. And then I was talking about the pathologist Humes and Boswell flip-flopping all over the place. And how about that little ploy that the physicians and the researchers know so well that was engineered by their good friend, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association? All of a sudden, from left field, there comes this great article in which he now is going to vindicate in retroactive fashion and reestablish the reputations of his friends Humes and Boswell. And so now you have them coming in, and now the wounds are in a different location from what they agreed under pressure when they were called in and met with the distinguished members of that forensic pathology panel, yours truly excluded. Well, under great pressure, they said, well, maybe the bullet hole really was 4 inches higher, 100 millimeters. Maybe it really was at the vertex. And then with JAMA, they went back to the occipital region. And you'll hear, by the way, this weekend from one of the 2 neurosurgeons who was there. And I'll leave it to you to decide then whether or not the neurosurgeon's description and depiction of what kind of brain tissue he saw is a little bit more valid and a little bit more to be relied upon than what the Warren Commission sycophants and self-appointed defenders, most of whom didn't even take high school chemistry if they could avoid it. I'll leave it to you to decide who you think can recognize the difference between cerebral and cerebellar tissue. You will decide in the next few days. And these guys flip-flopping all around, and close friends, too, of some of the members of the panel and so on. Humes went on to become president of the College of American Pathologists. You know, hey, that's like you lose a slam dunk case, you know, the prosecutors in the O.J. case lose the case, blow the slam dunk case, and you become overnight television people, right? You come in and you perjure yourself under oath. No, Mr. Bailey, I have never used the N-word, and you become a national hero with your own radio and television program and consultant to all kinds. You know, that's America for you, okay? And the reward for Commander Humes for having screwed up the autopsy on the President of the United States, bungled it. The members of the House Select Committee who made that quantum leap and said that the Warren Commission got it right anyway, they were even at that time more critical of Humes and Boswell than I had ever been up until that point. And the punishment for Commander Humes was to elect him president of the College of American Pathologists. People ask, you know, hey, what's going on out there? And are we being too harsh in our criticism? And so on, it moves through. And how many people here, aside from the in crowd, how many people know the House Select Committee on Assassinations, established by the United States Congress, concluded that there was a conspiracy? A high degree of likelihood, whatever the exact words were. Now, I know their theory wasn't exactly what mine is or what one of the other critics is. That's okay, and I want to comment on that a little bit later on. But that was their conclusion. So what does that mean? The United States Congress, they arrived at that conclusion? Has there been any follow-up? What's the sequel to that? Was that an academic exercise? Was that an undertaking designed for futility? That's the conclusion they arrive at, and it's left hanging. And then, of course, let's jump to Oliver Stone. Do you remember? I recall vividly, 3 months before his movie came out, he was being savaged in the newspapers. The New York Times, darn it, the guy who is not a movie critic, one of the early people that bought in, along with the other New York Times and the other news media establishment, they were dissecting Oliver Stone. You would have thought that this guy had committed the greatest crime in the world. In the meantime, I'm puzzled, I'm offended as a non-Catholic by the last temptation of Jesus Christ, putting words and actions into his mouth. I'm wondering and offended in a way, puzzled, amused other times. Warren Beatty playing Bugsy Siegel, you name it, Genghis Khan, Sam Houston, I mean, you pick your hero or villain. Every movie script writer and director can do what they want to, put words in anybody's mouth. Not Oliver Stone, no. Oh, no. How does he know what anybody said? How does he know what Senator Russell Long said on the airplane? What was that great line, "This dog won't hunt"? I mean, I don't know. Did Russell Long say that? It's a damn good line. I'd expect a southern gentleman from Louisiana to utter something like that, especially when it comes from the mouth of Walter Matthau. He made it sound so real. But I mean, was that so horrible? What did he do? The man was literally crucified. Were the critic researchers responsible for that? If it's just a straightforward murder case, then what is the problem? Well, on and on it goes. And a great point was made upstairs too. Then as we move on and into the other aspects of this case, Jim Lazar, who's been one of the pioneers in this field, made a statement something like this. He said, you know, he wanted to turn the question around and throw it back in a friendly way, but in a provocative manner, to the news media. something, instead of continuing to refer to Warren Commission buffs, conspiratorialists, and so on, why don't you get serious about this? Why don't you delve into it? Why don't you look into this? Well, let's talk about that for a moment. Some of you are too young to remember that Franklin Delano Roosevelt had 33 pounds of metal were necessary to brace his legs so that he could stand. And the rest of the time, he was in a wheelchair. Anybody here ever see a picture of him in a wheelchair? Today, you would have people, if he were speaking where I am, I guarantee you there would be 3 people beneath this platform who would have drilled holes so that a mini camera could take pictures of those metal braces. And tomorrow there would be pictures, then discussions and diagrams with comments from metallurgical engineers at distinguished universities, MIT and CMU, talking about that particular kind of metal and that particular kind of screw. And talking about screws, how's about Franklin Delano Roosevelt taking his mistress to Warm Springs, Georgia? Did anybody ever raise a fuss about that? And how about Eisenhower with his Captain Wath that he had on the side? And how about our Jack beloved Kennedy and Judith Exner? Sleeps with Jack one night, sees Sam Giancana, top mafioso in Chicago the next day. Where were the news media? Morally, ethically, I don't care. They could have slept with anybody that they wanted to. I was going to say considering whom they were married to, but I won't say that. I make no statement to pass more on other concerns. The reason for these historical observations is to point out to you when the news media talks today, how could this have been? I want to remind the news media, is a whole new world. Before Vietnam and Watergate, you people were asleep at the switch. The government told you anything, and they got away with anything. Allende in Chile, the M brothers in Vietnam, revolution in Guatemala, whatever they did. How many discussions, except for an occasional writer here or there? It was a whole new world. Was it better? Was it worse? That's a discussion for another day. The point I make is that when you think of that case and you say, hey, how could it have been? And news media today say, gee, I don't really believe this, and so on. Think. In 1963, news media game in America was a totally different game, for better or for worse. Maybe it's gotten a little too far. I remember when Ronald Reagan had a colonic polyp, I swear, no exaggeration. If you read the New York Times, you did not have to go to the pathology lectures in medical school to study colonic polyps. By the time you finished, you knew more about adenomatous and papillomatous polyps and villus adenomas and what was the precancerous lesion and so on, with diagrams and sketches was enough, to make you sick if you weren't a doctor. And that was a kind of discussion that then took place. And today, one act of fellatio and the world is ready to come to an end in America. And back then, you can bring hookers into the White House and nobody cared, right? So that's a good reflection for our news media folks. And now let's move into, and this is a forensic scientific program, admittedly, but we talk about the assassination and try to understand it, why it took place, and why might it have occurred. And may I point out to you again, if you don't know history and you don't place something at the time that it occurred, it's like meaningless. Even an argument with your spouse, the loss of a ball game, whatever. You got to know what the facts were. What was going on? What was happening nationally, internationally? Did we have a real Cold War with Russia? Were there some people that wanted to drop some atomic bombs even right after World War II? Do you remember Admiral Crommelin and General whatever his name was, I'll think of it, that wanted to drop bombs then, and we're talking about dropping atomic bombs on Russia just to, we'll teach them, they better not make a move. Now, what if you had somebody, it might be a little warming of that Cold War. Cuba, 90 miles away, Havana, hey, maybe there might be a little bit of a détente here. Maybe, we might work something out. We've had dictators. We've dealt with them before, usually right-wing dictators, but maybe we could pick up a lefty too. Won't kill us. And then how about the Vietnam War? It's beginning to blossom and burgeon, and there's Laos and Cambodia. Hey, maybe we might give that a second thought. Maybe we'll get the hell out of there and come on back home. And home, yeah. Hey, what about those Jim Crow laws? What about all those blacks in the South that fought just like white troops fought in World War II and got killed? What about all those blacks that can't go into restaurants, can't go into theaters? When I went to Montgomery, Alabama, called into the Air Force in 1959, I had an intelligent young man of 29, 30, whatever, and I couldn't believe, separate benches, separate water fountains, separate days and entrances to the park, and so on and so forth. And there were things to deal with in America. Those were the things that were happening when you want to try to understand this case. Forensic science, John referred to it. There was no DNA, but there was blood typing. There was the ability to examine tissues and see what kinds of tissues they might be. There were things that could be learned. We didn't, Conan Doyle laid out a few things with Sherlock Holmes. We didn't wait for criminalistics to evolve until there was a Henry Lee. There were some things going on back in those years, etc., that could and should have been done. And there are things that still could be done today. We talk about the single bullet, and I deliberately am not showing my slides. We'll get into all of that in the next 3 days and so on. But there were experiments done then, and there are experiments that can still be done today. Oh, bullets can do this? Fine. Is that right? My favorite slide, which I definitely will show at this conference sometime, my favorite slide is that composite picture where they firing using 3 sets of targets, cotton wadding, goat carcasses, fracturing one rib to simulate Connolly's rib fracture, human cadavers shooting through the radii to simulate Connolly's radial fracture. They then selected the representative bullet from each of those 3 categories to support their case. A beautiful slide. There is Commission Exhibit 399 in all of its grandeur. And you got the 2 bullets that went into cotton wadding striking nothing, and you'll see the extrusion of some lead from the base, from the impact of the firing mechanism. The bullet that broke one rib of a goat looks wider and flatter. You say at first glance, hey, that's a different caliber ammunition. It's distorted. And then the bullet that broke one radius and a human cadaver has the typical mushrooming, peeling back effect. That's their slide. They won't repeat that experiment. Professor John Nichols, pathologist at University of Kansas Medical School, he did this clandestinely. He got exactly the same results. That experiment could be done tomorrow, repeatedly. We'll hear from my beloved friend and distinguished colleague, Michael Barton. We'll hear then what the response is. Maybe Michael has a surprise for me. In 1978, I said to my 8 colleagues, yeah, it was 8-1, as Michael pointed out upstairs in the news media. It was 8-1. And I said at that time, okay, you guys are very good. All board-certified, experienced forensic pathologists. You've done thousands of autopsies. I would say probably collectively among the 8 of you, you got 100,000 autopsies in place. And at your offices, from your distinguished colleagues and predecessors, you may have 250,000 more. And you can go to Europe and Asia and Africa and reach out. You bring back to me 1 bullet, not 1%, not 100th, not 1,000th, 1 bullet that has ever done what you claim this bullet did. That was 25 years ago. Well, I'm still waiting for that present. I'm still waiting for that bullet 25 years later. And so, my friends, where are we and why are we there? Where are we is here at this wonderful convocation with all of these great experts, and we're going to learn a lot. And why are we here? Well, we're here, even those who believe the Warren Commission was right, I hope they would be strong enough in their professionalism to say, hey, there are some unanswered questions. Yeah, we make that quantum leap despite the inadequate, inept, ridiculous autopsy, not recognizing a bullet hole in the front of the president's neck, thinking that a bullet could be forced out back through a 7x4 millimeter hole in the back when external cardiac massage pressure is applied to the front of the chest. The next day thinking that a bullet traveling 2,100 feet per second going through 6 inches of soft tissue in the neck would see the starch white collar of the president get frightened to death and plop absolutely dead right in his tracks. And then 5 months later, that bullet, now having been reinvigorated and having been restored with full vibrancy and energy, now has picked itself up out of the front of his clothing, gone through Connolly's chest, gone through Connolly's wrist, and into Connolly's left thigh. It's a hell of a bullet. It is indeed the magic bullet. It happily and readily accommodates you. Whatever you need, and whatever point in time, it will do that for you. And I hope that my colleagues even, and my friends and others on that side, will recognize that yes, there are things that still can be done. Let's put an end to this stuff then, so there won't be a 50th anniversary. And we'll show once and for all the critic researchers that we got it right. But to those of us who are among the 80 to 85% of the American public, they continue consistently to reject the Warren Commission report. Yes, despite all of the establishment news media people, despite the Dan Rathers and the Peter Jennings, and the people whose careers and reputations bloomed and blossomed and emanated from their coverage in those years, they're not about to back off from that. These are news media megalomaniacs, egocentric people to the ultimate degree. They're going to choke and swallow and renege and rescind on that? Yeah, sure, you wait for hell to freeze over before that'll ever happen. Okay? Those people, despite them and their continuing efforts, the show last night, the show that's going on right now as we are here gathered, once again attempting to whitewash. And you want to know something? It's not going to make any difference. 80 to 85% of the Americans, including the high school kids who are here tonight, are going to continue to reject the Warren Commission. Is that hard science? No, it's not hard science. But you tell me how many subjects you can think of in America that have 80 to 85% of Americans consistently, repeatedly, over decades, voting the same way. Black, white, north, south, Catholic, Protestant, Jew, north, you name it, south, whatever religion, whatever group, you name it. There aren't 85% of people who think that baseball is a good sport. There aren't 85% of people who think that sex is a good idea. And you got 85%. So it is there. And all of the apologists are not going to make it go away. And why can't we then allow it to go away? I'll tell you why. My thought in closing, because it wasn't just a murder, as was pointed out upstairs by Roger Feynman and I and many others have pointed out, and you all know this, of course, but maybe some of the younger people and non-lawyers don't realize there's no statute of limitations on homicide. Well, even then you say, hey, but aren't there unsolved murders? Yes, there are, but not of presidents. Not of presidents. Of you and me, and of our neighbors and our friends and our relatives, yes, but not of presidents. Well, okay, so he's a president, he was an important man, but so what? The so what of it is, we know, my friends, and it came to be known darn soon, that the Russians and the Chinese and the Cubans, individually or collectively, did not orchestrate this assassination. The plans did not emanate, did not spring from the fertile Machiavellian, malevolent minds of the people in Moscow, in Beijing, and Havana. It came to be known darn soon that Americans were behind this. That's painful. Very, very painful indeed. Where do you go? What doors do you knock upon? What rooms do you enter? And what are you going to find as you walk into those edifices? Do we want to go that way? Oswald's dead. He's been executed by Jack Ruby. It's all over. This guy, 2.5 years in Russia, communist sympathizer, not a very likable person. It's over, man. Johnson wants that report. Get it in. Hurry up. Finish it. Wrap it up smoothly. Do you think for one moment whatever any of us here tonight may think about J. Edgar Hoover, and I know what 90% of us probably think about J. Edgar Hoover and about Lyndon Johnson, were there two more knowledgeable, politically savvy, powerful individuals in America? Was there anything in America that if they wanted to find out, they could not have found out? If J. Edgar Hoover wanted to find out how many times you had sex with your wife, how many times you went to the bathroom, whether you carry your lunch to work, I guarantee you he would have put on 60 or 100 FBI agents and he would have found out. My point simply is, well, I don't believe, and my critic researcher friends, one or more of them, may believe otherwise, I don't believe that Hoover or Johnson had anything to do with the primary conspiracy to kill Kennedy. Do I believe that they came to know everything later on? You bet your life. There's no way in the world that those two people would not have come to know. But that was not the time to get into things, because who knows who was responsible. And maybe you think you know, and maybe we'll come to learn a little bit more in the next 3 days. That's not exactly our purpose. But what our purpose is to seek truth, to seek justice, and to come to know and to recognize what happened on November 22nd, 1963. What happened, my friends, was simply the assassination of a president who was so powerful, so charismatic, wealthy, connected. There was no way in the world that he could be defeated at the polls. And I don't speak as a Democrat. This is not the purpose of this symposium. We know that there are people to the right and people to the left, and this is a mixed bag on this whole Kennedy assassination. There's no one particular political group that lines up one way or another. The point simply is that that was one kind of politics. 5 more years of which were to follow with Jack, and 8 more years of which were to be followed by Bobby Kennedy. And if you were not of a mind to see the kinds of changes that maybe could be anticipated, whether they would have come to fruition or not, I don't know. You'll hear from people who are more historical scholars than I, whether or not there would have been a warming with Russia, whether there would have been a détente with Cuba, whether there would have been a withdrawal from Vietnam. The point is, it could have been reasonably anticipated over those next 13 years. And it wasn't a ball game. You weren't going to sit back and say, hey, they're up at bat. Wait till we get up there, man. You'll see how many runs we score. No way in the world was that going to be allowed. There was only one way to bring back the kind of America that you believe should exist, and not the kind of America, not down that windy, treacherous road that Jack Kennedy and his brother Bobby were leading us. And the execution is what is necessary, because there is no other way. And the assassination of the president was the overthrow of the government. And my friends, the world over, what it has been known and called and labeled everywhere but in America, it was a coup d'etat. That's what happened in America, and that is why we must still find out, if it takes another 40 years, what happened on November 22nd, 1963. Thank you.